They told her the beast in the eastern cell was rabid, cursed, better left to starve. But every night for 3 months, Isla had pushed scraps of meat through the rusted bars, and the black wolf with the golden eyes had never once tried to bite her hand. She didn't know she'd been feeding the most powerful man in the kingdom. The prison beneath Greyhaven Castle smelled like rot and despair. Isla had worked there for 4 years, emptying chamber pots and scrubbing blood from stone floors, jobs no one else would take. At 19, she was small, quick, and invisible, perfect for a place where prisoners screamed through the night and guards drank to forget what they'd done. The black wolf had arrived in winter, dragged through the corridors in chains that burned his flesh. Isla had seen him from the shadows, massive, snarling, more monster than animal. The guards said he'd killed 3 men before they'd subdued him. They said he was diseased. They threw him in the furthest cell and left him to die. But Isla couldn't stop thinking about his eyes. She'd seen plenty of wolves. Greyhaven was a werewolf kingdom, and the prison held dozens of shifters locked in animal form by spelled collars. Their eyes were always flat, broken, but this wolf's eyes burned with intelligence, with fury, with something that looked almost like grief. The first time she brought him food, her hands shook so hard she nearly dropped the meat. She'd stolen it from the guard's dinner, half a roasted chicken, still warm. The wolf had been lying in the corner, his black fur matted with blood and filth. "I don't know if you can understand me," she whispered, crouching by the bars. "But you shouldn't starve." She pushed the chicken through the gap. The wolf's head lifted. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, slowly, he crawled forward and ate. That became their routine. Every night after her shift, Isla smuggled food to the eastern cell. Bread, meat. Once, an entire fish she'd caught in the river. The wolf always waited for her. Always ate gently, never lunging, never threatening. Sometimes she talked to him, about her day, about the weather, about the little cottage where she lived alone since her mother died. "You're the only one who listens," she told him one night, sitting with her back against the bars. "Everyone else looks right through me." The wolf pressed his nose against the bars, inches from her shoulder. She heard him inhale deeply, and something in her chest tightened. "Who are you?" she whispered. He couldn't answer. The collar around his neck glowed with runes that prevented shifting, but his eyes held hers, and she felt seen in a way she'd never experienced. 3 months passed. Isla learned the wolf's moods, when he was hurting, when he was restless, when he seemed to be watching the guards with calculated patience. She brought him water in a stolen bowl. She cleaned the worst of the filth from outside his cell, ignoring the other prisoners' jeers. "Why do you care about that monster?" one of them spat. "He's not a monster," Isla said quietly. Then everything changed. It happened on a night when the prison was louder than usual. Isla arrived with her bundle of food to find the guards gathered in the main corridor, passing around a wanted poster. She caught a glimpse of the image, a man with black hair and golden eyes, wearing a crown. 3 months and still no sign of the Alpha King, one guard muttered. Vanished right out of his own palace. "Good riddance," another said. Heard he was a tyrant anyway. Isla's blood ran cold. She looked toward the eastern cell, hidden in shadow at the end of the corridor. The black wolf sat perfectly still, watching her. She waited until the guards dispersed, then walked slowly to his cell. Her heart hammered. She pulled the wanted poster from her pocket. She'd stolen it without thinking. The man in the drawing had the same eyes as the wolf, the same bearing, the same presence that made the air feel heavier. "You're him," she breathed. "You're King Caelan." The wolf's ears flattened. He lowered his head, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked afraid. Isla's mind raced. The Alpha King had been missing for months. The entire kingdom was searching. There was a reward, enough gold to change her life forever. She could turn him in. She should turn him in. Instead, she knelt by the bars and reached through. Her hand rested on his massive head. The wolf froze, trembling under her touch. "Someone did this to you," she said. "Someone put that collar on you and threw you in here to die." He made a sound low in his throat, not quite a growl. "Agreement." "Who?" she asked. He couldn't tell her. Not like this. But his eyes shifted toward the main corridor, toward the guards who served the castle, and Isla understood. This was a betrayal, a coup, and she was the only person in the kingdom who knew the truth. Isla didn't sleep that night. She sat in her cottage, the wanted poster spread on the table, trying to piece together a mystery that could get her killed. If King Caelan had been overthrown by someone inside his own court, then that someone was now running the kingdom, which meant turning him in wouldn't bring justice. It would deliver him straight back to whoever had done this. At dawn, she made her decision. She had to break him out. The plan was insane. She was a prison cleaner with no connections, no power, no skills beyond being invisible. But she'd spent 4 years watching the guards, learning their routines, mapping the prison's weaknesses in her mind. And she had one advantage. Nobody paid attention to her. She started gathering supplies. A file, stolen from the blacksmith's workshop. Rope, taken from the storage room. A cloak heavy enough to hide a wolf. She hid everything in the cleaning closet near the eastern cell. At night, she worked on the collar. The runes were etched into the metal, glowing faintly. She had no magic, no way to break the spell. But the collar itself was physical. It had hinges, a lock, weak points worn down by months against the wolf's throat. "Hold still," she whispered, kneeling by the bars with the file. "This is going to take time." Caelan pressed against the bars, extending his neck to give her access. His trust was absolute, and it terrified her. If she failed, they'd both end up in cells. Or worse. She filed every night for a week, tiny scrapes of metal falling away. The guards never noticed. Why would they? She was just a cleaning girl. On the 8th night, the lock broke. The collar fell open, and Isla pulled it through the bars with shaking hands. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the wolf's body began to glow. The shift was violent. Bones cracking, reforming. Black fur receding into skin. Isla stumbled backward as the wolf became a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, covered in scars and months of grime, but unmistakably powerful. Unmistakably a king. Caelan collapsed against the bars, gasping. His voice came out hoarse from disuse. You freed me." "Not yet," Isla said, heart racing. "You're still in the cell." He laughed, a raw, broken sound. "You're right." His golden eyes found hers. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's wrong," she said simply. "What they did to you, leaving you here to suffer. It's wrong." Something shifted in his expression. He reached through the bars, and his hand cupped her face with shocking gentleness. "What's your name?" "Isla. Isla," he repeated, like a prayer. "When I get out of here, I'm going to make sure you never have to scrub another floor. Let's focus on getting you out first." The cell lock was easier than the collar. She'd stolen the key from a guard who'd passed out drunk. The door swung open, and Caelan stepped into the corridor for the first time in 3 months. He swayed, weakened by captivity, but his presence filled the space like a gathering storm. "Can you walk?" Isla asked. "I can run if I have to." He looked down at himself, naked, filthy, barely human after months as a wolf. "Though I'll need clothes." She'd thought of that. She pressed a bundle into his arms, stolen guard's uniform, too small for his frame, but better than nothing. While he dressed, she explained the route she'd planned. Through the sewers, out past the east wall, into the forest where they wouldn't be tracked. "You've thought of everything," Caelan said, wonder in his voice. "I had time." They moved through the prison like ghosts. Isla led, Caelan followed, his hand occasionally touching her shoulder as if to confirm she was real. They passed cells full of sleeping prisoners. They slipped past guard stations during shift changes. They were almost at the sewer entrance when footsteps echoed behind them. "Stop!" They ran. Isla's heart slammed against her ribs as shouts erupted throughout the prison. Caelan grabbed her hand, pulling her faster through the maze of corridors. Alarm bells began to ring. "This way." Isla yanked him into the cleaning closet, pressing them both into the shadows behind a shelf of supplies. Boots thundered past. Voices shouted orders. In the darkness, she could feel Caelan's breath against her hair. His body was tense, coiled, ready to fight. "If they catch us," he started. "They won't." The footsteps faded. Isla waited, counting heartbeats, then led them out. The sewer entrance was ahead, a rusted grate she'd loosened weeks ago. They squeezed through and dropped into ankle-deep water that smelled like death. "Welcome to the worst part," Isla muttered. They waded through darkness, following the current. Behind them, the prison bells continued to scream. Above them, they heard more guards mobilizing. But the sewers were a labyrinth, and Isla had mapped every turn. 20 minutes later, they emerged outside the castle walls, gasping in clean air. The forest loomed ahead, dark and welcoming. Caelan pulled Isla into the trees just as torches appeared on the walls. They ran until the castle disappeared behind them. Then Caelan stopped, pulling Isla around to face him. His eyes blazed in the moonlight. "You just committed treason for me," he said. "I know. You could have turned me in, collected the reward. Instead, you risked everything." "You would have done the same," Isla said. His laugh was incredulous. "You don't know that." "Yes," she said quietly. "I do." Caelan stared at her like she was a mystery he desperately needed to solve. Then he did something that stole her breath. He knelt before her. There in the forest, a king kneeling before a cleaning girl. "I owe you my life," he said. "And I swear on everything I am, I will repay that debt." They traveled north for 3 days, staying off the roads, sleeping in hidden hollows. Caelan grew stronger with each mile, his body remembering its power. And with his strength came his story. "My own cousin," he told her on the second night, as they huddled around a small fire. "Rowan. I trusted him with everything. My council seat, my military secrets. He wanted the crown, so he hired a witch to trap me in wolf form and had his men throw me in that cell to die slowly, forgotten." Isla's hands curled into fists. "How did no one question it? You're the king. Didn't anyone look for you?" "Rowan told the court I'd gone mad with grief after my mate died." Caelan's voice went rough. "He said I'd shifted and run into the wilderness, refusing to return. He produced witnesses, all lying, all paid. By the time my loyal guards grew suspicious, Rowan had replaced them with his own men." "Your mate," Isla said quietly. "I'm sorry. She died 2 years ago. Childbirth." His jaw worked. "The baby didn't survive either. After that, I stopped caring about much. Made it easier for Rowan to isolate me." Isla reached across the fire and took his hand. "You're going to get your kingdom back." "We," Caelan corrected, gripping her fingers. "We're going to get it back." On the 3rd day, they reached a village in the Northern Territories, loyal lands where Rowan's influence hadn't spread. Caelan's presence caused an immediate uproar. Villagers fell to their knees, weeping. The local alpha, a grizzled warrior named Marcus, nearly collapsed with relief. "My king," Marcus breathed. "We thought. The rumors said you were dead." "Nearly was," Caelan said. "But this woman saved me." I turned to Isla. She wanted to disappear, but Caelan kept his hand on her shoulder, anchoring her beside him. "She freed me from a cell beneath Greyhaven when she could have let me die. She risked her life to get me out. She is under my protection, and anyone who harms her answers to me." The pronouncement sent a clear message. Isla wasn't just some girl anymore. She was the king's savior. She was untouchable. Within a week, Caelan had gathered his loyal supporters. Word spread like wildfire. The Alpha King left. Warriors arrived from across the kingdom, furious at Rowan's betrayal, ready to fight. Caelan's true council emerged from hiding, bringing evidence of Rowan's corruption, his lies, his crimes. "We march on Greyhaven in 2 days," Caelan announced to his assembled forces. But that night, alone with Isla in the house Marcus had provided, his confidence cracked. "What if I fail?" he asked. "What if more people die because of me?" Isla moved to where he stood by the window. "You won't fail. And even if you're afraid, you'll still fight. That's what makes you a good king. You care about the cost." He turned to her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "These past weeks with you have been the freest I've felt in years. Even running for our lives, even sleeping on the ground, I was happy because you were there." "Caelan, I'm trying to say thank you," he interrupted. "And that when this is over, I want you to stay. Not as a servant, not as a subject. As whatever you want to be." Isla's heart raced. "What if I want to be someone who challenges you when you're wrong? Who reminds you that power isn't everything?" His smile was soft, real. "Then that's exactly who I need." The march on Greyhaven was swift and decisive. Rowan's forces crumbled when they saw their true king alive, leading an army. Most surrendered immediately. Rowan himself tried to flee but was captured by Marcus's men. Caelan confronted him in the throne room where he'd once ruled. Rowan was on his knees, stripped of his stolen crown, facing the cousin he'd betrayed. "You were my family," Caelan said, his voice heavy with grief. "I would have given you anything. Except the crown," Rowan spat. "The crown was never yours to take." Caelan's judgment was final. "Exile. You'll live, but far from this kingdom, with nothing but the knowledge of what you threw away." It was a mercy Rowan didn't deserve. But Caelan had learned something in that cell, that revenge didn't heal wounds. Only moving forward did. The coronation renewal happened a month later. Caelan stood before his kingdom, crowned properly, his people cheering. And beside him, wearing a dress of midnight blue, stood Isla. "The woman who saved your king," Caelan announced, "will serve as my chief advisor. She will speak with my voice, and her counsel will guide this kingdom toward justice." The crowd roared approval. Isla's eyes filled with tears. This was impossible. She was nobody, a cleaning girl, an orphan. "You see ghosts where others see glory," Caelan murmured to her. "You see suffering others ignore. That's exactly what this kingdom needs." Later, when the celebrations quieted and they stood alone on the palace balcony, Caelan took her hand. "I meant what I said in the forest. You can be whatever you want." Isla looked out at the kingdom spread below them, a kingdom she'd helped save. "I want to be the person who makes sure no one else gets thrown in a cell and forgotten. I want to be the voice for people like me." "Then that's what you'll be." He raised her hand to his lips. "And maybe, someday, you'll want to be something else too." "Like what?" "Like someone who stands beside me. Not as advisor. As equal. As mate." Isla's breath caught. She turned to face him fully. This king who'd been a wolf, who trusted her completely, who'd changed her entire world. "Ask me again in a year," she said softly. "When we're sure this is real and not just gratitude." Caelan's smile was brilliant. "I'll ask you every day until you say yes." A year later, she did. And the girl who'd fed a wolf through prison bars became the queen who reformed a kingdom, proving that the smallest acts of kindness could change everything.